Disclaimer: this content is only for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. The clock on the office wall ticked with a steady, stubborn rhythm, each second stretching the space between us like a taut wire ready to snap. He sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, brows knit over the work that seemed to consume him, but his attention kept breaking, flickering toward me like a moth drawn to its only flame. I stood by the window, letting the golden afternoon light spill over me. My fingertips traced the edge of the blinds, my pulse quickening in the charged quiet. The air between us wasn't just thick, it was trembling, alive, as if it knew what I was about to do. We'd been married long enough to know each other's silences, to read the way a breath catches, the way eyes linger. But today, something in me refused to wait for his hands to find me after hours. I wanted to break the invisible line between duty and desire, to remind him that beneath his spreadsheets and deadlines, I was still the woman who could unravel him with a glance. When I stepped closer, his pen froze mid-word. His gaze climbed to meet mine, slow and deliberate. My palm rested lightly on the polished edge of his desk, feeling the faint vibrations of his work beneath the wood. The warmth of his presence pulled me forward until I was close enough to catch the scent of his cologne, familiar, grounding, and yet electric in that moment. A brush of my fingertips along his jaw, a faint curve of a smile, just enough to pull him out of his world and into mine. His hand twitched against the papers, not quite touching me, but aching to. Every movement, every glance was deliberate, our own language of foreplay built over years. The quiet intimacy of a marriage still burning beneath the surface. My heart pounded, knowing that with one choice, one shift in space, I could make him forget every task on that desk. And so, I moved closer, letting my voice drop low and warm, carrying words that would change the rhythm of this day forever. His chair creaked softly as he leaned back, his eyes never leaving mine. There was a question in them, half warning, half surrender, but neither of us spoke. The hum of the air conditioner filled the space where words might have been, its steady drone only making the silence heavier. "You've been here for hours," I said quietly, brushing a loose strand of hair from my face. My voice wasn't accusing, it was something softer, something that ached. "You didn't even notice the sun moving across the window." A faint smile tugged at his lips, the kind that said he heard more in my tone than in my words. "Deadlines," he murmured, tapping the papers on his desk, though his fingers no longer seemed interested in the work beneath them. I let my hand rest on the desk, the distance between us measured now in inches instead of steps. "And what about me?" I asked, not as a challenge, but as a reminder. He looked at me like I was both the interruption and the cure. The last few weeks had been heavy, late nights, short conversations, moments stolen but never enough. Marriage teaches you how to endure the space between those moments, but it doesn't make you want them any less. I could see the push and pull in him, the man who wanted to keep his professional composure and the husband who knew what my closeness meant. My fingertips skimmed the corner of his desk, tracing lazy, absent patterns, each movement deliberate enough to draw his attention but subtle enough to keep the moment suspended. The light outside shifted again, spilling gold across his face. For a moment, he looked younger, less burdened, as if I had pulled him back to a memory of us before the weight of work and years had settled in. "Lock the door," I said softly, almost like a suggestion rather than a request. His gaze sharpened, but he didn't move right away. He studied me for a beat longer, and in that look was everything: desire, restraint, the history of every time we had chosen to wait, and the memory of the nights we hadn't. The air between us was no longer still. It was a storm building quietly, both of us knowing that once it broke, nothing else in this office would matter. His hand moved, almost imperceptibly, to straighten the papers in front of him, though his eyes never left mine. It was the kind of motion people make when they're stalling, not because they're disinterested, but because they know that crossing the line will cost them control. "You didn't come here just to check on me," he said finally, his voice low and measured. I tilted my head, letting a faint smile play on my lips. "Maybe I came to remind you you're more than what's on that desk." My fingertips tapped lightly on the surface, each tap in sync with the beat of my own pulse. Outside, the city carried on, distant car horns, muffled chatter from the street below. But in this room, the air felt sealed, holding only the weight of us. There was another reason I'd come. One I hadn't spoken yet. The late nights weren't just about his work. They were about someone else, someone who had been taking up too much of his calendar lately. I'd seen the messages, nothing overtly wrong, but threaded with a familiarity that made my stomach knot. It wasn't jealousy exactly, it was the quiet fear of losing ground to someone who didn't know him the way I did. And maybe, standing here, this close, was my way of reminding him where he belonged. "I've been thinking," I said softly, "that we don't fight for our moments enough. We let them slip." His jaw flexed, and his gaze shifted from my eyes to my mouth, only for a heartbeat, before returning. "That's not true," he murmured, though it sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as me. I reached out, brushing my fingers against the cuff of his sleeve. Not his hand, just that subtle edge of fabric that connected to his skin. A touch that could be dismissed as nothing, yet meant everything. His chair rolled back slightly, not as retreat, but as space he could close if he chose to. "You know I can't just drop everything," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. "You could," I replied, holding his gaze. "You just don't." The moment thickened. We both knew this wasn't just about today, or even this week. It was about every time we'd let the world seep in between us, every time we'd promised to make it up later. I leaned forward slightly, just enough that my shadow fell across his papers. "Later," I whispered, "is a habit we can't afford anymore." His breath caught, not loud, but enough for me to hear it. Somewhere in the hallway, footsteps echoed and passed. Neither of us moved until they faded, our eyes locked in a standoff of desire and defiance. And still, the storm stayed just at the edge of breaking. He rose from his chair so quietly I barely heard it. The shift was subtle, but it stole the air from the room. Now, there was no desk between us, only a breath, a heartbeat, and the faint hum of the city outside. "Why do you do this?" he asked, voice low, almost unsteady. "Do what?" My words were calm, but my chest tightened at the look in his eyes, like he was both drawn to me and afraid of what giving in might mean. "You walk in here," he said, glancing at the door as if to remind us of the world beyond it, "and it's like the rest of it, deadlines, meetings, just stops existing. You know what that does to me." "That's the point," I whispered. He took a step closer, and the distance collapsed. My back grazed the edge of the desk, the wood cool against me, a stark contrast to the heat building between us. His hand hovered, just hovered, near my hip, close enough for me to feel the warmth radiating from it, but still not touching. I could smell the faint trace of his aftershave, familiar and grounding, and yet the way he was looking at me made it feel entirely new. My voice caught before I spoke again. "We can't keep letting life decide when we're allowed to feel like this." His jaw tightened. "And what if feeling like this makes me forget everything else? Then you'll remember me instead." The room seemed smaller now, shadows deepening as the light shifted. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, but it sounded far away, irrelevant. His eyes traced my face like he was memorizing it, as if afraid the next moment might pull me away. I saw it then, the vulnerability he kept buried under the armor of his work. It was in the way his breath slowed, the way his posture softened even as he fought not to touch me. This wasn't just desire, it was need laced with fear, with longing for something we'd both been too careful to reach for lately. I let my hand move first. Just a gentle touch at his wrist, the faintest brush of skin. His breath hitched, and I felt it, how close we were to crossing that invisible line. The hallway outside was silent now, the building holding its breath with us. His gaze dropped briefly to where my hand rested, then back to my eyes. We stood there, suspended, both knowing that the moment we stepped forward, there'd be no going back. And still, neither of us moved, because the waiting had become its own kind of exquisite torture. A sudden vibration broke the moment, his phone, lighting up on the desk beside me. The name on the screen made my stomach tighten. I didn't have to read the message, the bold letters of her name were enough. The same name that had been appearing more and more lately, tucked between work updates and urgent meeting requests. His eyes flicked to the phone, then back to me. He didn't move to pick it up. "You're not going to answer?" I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. "It can wait," he replied, though there was a flicker in his expression, a shadow of something unspoken. The air shifted. What had been pure heat between us was now threaded with something sharper. Not distrust, exactly, but the ache of wondering where you stand. I stepped aside so he could reach the phone if he wanted to, but he didn't. Instead, he placed his palm flat on the desk beside me, leaning closer. "Don't let that take this away from us," he said, his voice almost a plea. But the thought was already in my head, the image of her leaning over his desk the way I was now, her laughter in the air where mine used to be. It wasn't that I thought he had crossed a line, but I could feel how close he might be to one if life kept pushing us apart. His other hand brushed against mine, fingertips grazing as if to tether me back to him. "You think I don't see what's happening?" he said softly. "I do. I don't know how to stop it without losing everything else I've worked for." "And what about us?" I whispered. "What do we lose if you don't?" The question hung between us like smoke. His gaze dropped to my lips, lingered there, then climbed back to my eyes. For a heartbeat, it felt like he might answer with something more than words. But instead, the phone lit up again, this time with a different name. One we both recognized. The client whose account was too important to ignore, the one that had been driving the late nights, the endless tension. He cursed under his breath, torn between the two worlds pulling at him. "Go," I said, though my chest ached. "Handle it." He didn't move. His hands stayed near mine, his body still close enough that I could feel the warmth of him. "If I walk out that door," he said, "you might not be here when I get back." It wasn't a threat. It was fear. I didn't answer. I just held his gaze, letting him see the truth of it, how much of me was still here, and how much was already starting to drift away. The phone kept buzzing between us, a sharp reminder of the world outside this moment. But this time, he reached over, not for the device, but for my hand. His fingers curled around mine, firm, steady, as if anchoring me there. "I've been letting work decide who I am," he said, his voice raw. "I can't lose you because of that." I searched his face, looking for hesitation, but found only the kind of clarity that comes when you've already chosen. "Then prove it," I said quietly. His eyes locked on mine, and without another word, he swept the phone into the drawer and shut it. The sound of it closing felt final, like a door slamming on everything that had been pulling him away. The space between us vanished. His hands framed my face, and the kiss he gave me wasn't hurried or desperate, it was deep, deliberate, threaded with every unspoken apology and promise. My fingers found his shirt, clutching the fabric as if to keep him from slipping away again. The office around us faded, leaving only the warmth of him, the steadiness of his touch, the relief in knowing he'd chosen us. It wasn't reckless passion, it was something far more dangerous, commitment reignited. When we finally broke apart, breathless but smiling, I thought the moment had given us everything we needed. That was when he said it. "I quit." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. "You, what?" "I've been offered another position," he said, his thumb brushing along my jaw. "Better hours. More us. I didn't tell you because I wasn't sure if I'd take it. But now," his voice softened. "Now I know." It was the twist I hadn't expected. Not just choosing me in the moment, but choosing me for all the moments to come. The tension that had been our shadow for weeks dissolved into something brighter. And as we stood there in the fading gold light, I realized this wasn't just the end of a fight, it was the beginning of a different kind of story. The office was quiet again, but it didn't feel heavy anymore. The phone stayed locked away, the papers forgotten, the city outside continuing its endless motion without us needing to chase it. He stayed close, his hand warm in mine as though letting go might undo everything we had just decided. There was no rush, no urgency, just a stillness that felt earned. We talked then, not about deadlines or accounts, but about dinners we hadn't made, trips we'd postponed, moments we'd promised each other later. The name that had appeared on his phone earlier? He explained, clear and open this time. A client, yes, but not a threat. The real danger had been the distance we'd allowed to grow between us. And in that honesty, I realized something. Sometimes it's not the outside world that steals your love, it's the quiet neglect that sneaks in when you think there will always be time. The sunlight had shifted to a softer gold, the last of the day brushing his face. I traced the line of his jaw with my fingertips, not because I needed to, but because I could. This was ours again. "I'll pick you up tomorrow," he said with a small smile, "but not from here." I laughed, soft, surprised. "Where, then?" "You'll see." His tone carried the same mystery it had when we first met, back when every moment felt like a possibility waiting to happen. We lingered in the doorway for a moment longer before stepping into the hall. And as the office lights clicked off behind us, I felt a quiet certainty settle in me. This was a turning point, not just a pause before life rushed in again. Whatever came next, we had chosen it together. Sometimes love isn't about grand gestures, it's about the decision, every single day, to stay in the room when it would be easier to walk away. And that evening, as the city exhaled around us, I knew, we had stopped waiting for later.